Hello, welcome to Scott's Odyssey. Today we find ourselves back at the Buchanan State Forest, and while walking along the established RR Arch Trail, I kept my eyes open for, well, the railroad arch that the trail's referencing. And what I came across may surprise you. Welcome to the South Pennsylvania Railroad Aqueduct. Wait. Aqueduct. See you in a minute. Welcome back. If you've watched my videos before, thank you for your patronage, and if you're new to Scott's Odyssey, welcome aboard. We are just a short distance from the Sidling Hill POW Camp number 6 and the abandoned Sidling Hill Turnpike Tunnel. And as you would potentially expect, there are remnants from before the POW camp, before the Turnpike Tunnel, and yes, even before the POW camp when it was the Civil Conservation Corps Branch Camp S-52. We're talking about 1881, the time of Vanderbilt's Southern Pennsylvania Railroad, a dream to build a railroad through the treacherous southern portion of Pennsylvania, crossing 6 mountain ridges and drilling out 9 tunnels in order to directly compete and potentially crush the existing Pennsylvania Railroad. Unfortunately, due to money and the result of poor business partners' endeavors, the Southern Pennsylvania Railroad failed as they headed into the Alleghenies and became known as Vanderbilt's Folly. Because of the portion of Pennsylvania that this massive transportation project was being built through, a site of steep mountains and hard stone, to this day, in comparison to the flatter portions of Pennsylvania, it has remained mostly untouched and uninhabited. This means the efforts put forth by the workers, with the exception of the adaptation of the route for the Pennsylvania Turnpike, remain intact and left behind. What is very curious is when you look at how much money the Pennsylvania Department of Transportation spent on building the Turnpike, you come to the realization that they were over budget. Way over budget. Nearly 30 times more than was ever anticipated over budget, which continues on to this day every time it is extended or repaired or resurfaced. And those numbers are buried so deep in all aspects of their historical documentation that you might think we were talking about Duffy's Cut and the way the PRR used to hide all of its misgivings and failures. Talk about who we once were and sometimes still are. And then to think about for a moment how much Vanderbilt was over budget and how much was spent to do the work to build his transportation system. And then if you add those two numbers together, because, well, it's not like Pennsylvania Department of Transportation laid the grade or milled the tunnels through these mountains. Ultimately, this gives us a picture of what is probably the most expensive roadway in the entire United States that the denizens of Pennsylvania are still paying for with the abundant debt of the state. But I digress. We are here to visit a remnant from back in the late mid-1880s that was left behind by the workers who were building Vanderbilt's South Pennsylvania Railroad. This site is called the South Pennsylvania Railroad Aqueduct. Yes, they call it an aqueduct. I've reached out to DCNR, the Department of Conservation and Natural Resources, for information on what is obviously a total and complete misnomer, and they responded this morning. All right, so I just want to let you know, I got a message back from DCNR. They did respond. I'm not going to tell you they didn't respond. They did respond. And this is what they tell me. I'm going to read you the email from undisclosed person because that would just be really wrong. Hi, Scott. As you will see when you get there, I'm here. The railroad arch is truly an aqueduct because not only did the Sicilian stonemasons build the above ground portion by hand with no mortar, but they also made a floor that Woodridge Run flows on today. That's it. You can't make this stuff up. This is an aqueduct because the Sicilians made it. That comes directly from DCNR. No joke. That's what we're dealing with. Let's get back to the video. So this is most definitely not an aqueduct. It is a railroad culvert. And I'm going to be a stickler to this point because the only thing worse than everyone calling it an aqueduct is the fact that I have seen blog posts and other videos where people keep referring to other culverts and canals as aqueducts. Maybe they meant viaduct. This is not a matter of simple grammar Nazi enthusiasm. This is a significant issue of people misusing words and thinking it's okay if everybody else does it. When you misuse a word, even when everyone else is doing it, it makes you ignorant. Yes, it makes you look like a complete idiot. So you should thank any grammar Nazi who gives you a nice, gentle correction. And no, I do not mean those who are being pedantic about your information. Those people are just trolls. So let's address what an aqueduct is. An aqueduct is simply any man-made channel that will convey water, usually across an area that water would not normally or naturally flow. So a canal lock is a form of an aqueduct. Bridges that carry water over rivers, ravines, mountains, or roads, they too may be an aqueduct. Heck, even a pipe that is elevated over any surface as a crossing device may also be an aqueduct. But this is not an aqueduct. It's a culvert, but not just any normal culvert. This one's extremely pretty, even fancy when you look at it closely, as we will shortly. And there's a reason for that. In the 1880s, it is said that a number of Sicilian masons were brought in to design and build this particular culvert. Now, again, just as a side note, all of the interpretive signs say Sicilian or workers from Sicily. And again, this is a bit of misinformation. It is possible that they were of Sicilian descent, yes. Would you call them a Sicilian in 1880? Well, no more than you would call someone from Istanbul a person from Constantinople. You see, Sicily was an oppressed country that was in direct opposition to Italy up until 1860, when Giuseppe Garibaldi led the liberation of the Sicilians, which in turn created the unification of Italy. So they were Italians, not Sicilians. Calling them Sicilians at this time was just a derogatory term being used in the United States to refer to these workers. And no, we are not going to get into the slang terms for people of Sicily, nor the people of Italy. So these Italian masons built this culvert and made it very appealing in design, function, and aesthetics. Now, to identify how this is a culvert, the stream is a low-lying, slow-flowing stream that may at times have a high-capacity flow, but not high enough to dictate a 15-foot high, 10-foot wide whole. And the culvert itself is not carrying anything over anything. It is just allowing the natural flow of the existing creek to continue to flow unimpeded. Sitting above this culvert and in direct alignment is the embankment of the planned Southern Railroad. You would not notice this immediately, but it is more than apparent that this site was just never completed when it comes to the filling in of the rest of the embankment. Lastly, this culvert is built as a dry stone or dry stack construction. A dry stone is a building technique that uses perfect alignment and perfect angles to construct a stone structure without the use of mortar or pins or pegs to bind them together, which makes this structure amazing on so many facets. Now, to answer the question of why is it so big and why is it so pretty? During this time, if you were traveling along or trying to find a path through the mountains of the Alleghenies, you would typically follow waterways. The reason for following a waterway is because if you follow a ridge, you may find yourself stuck at a cliff that you can't get down from, or the side of a mountain that you couldn't take an animal down safely. So because the height of the embankment was so tall through this portion, they needed something more than a simple culvert to allow water passage. It had to be tall, it had to have a floor, it had to have little to nothing jutting out on the sides, and it had to be wide enough for a cart. You see, if you had a horse or a mule, you can train them to walk over railroad tracks, but to get them and the cart up a steep, loosely packed embankment would be nearly impossible. So you build a culvert specifically designed to allow a horse or a mule with a cart to pass underneath the rail line. This culvert is really interesting, and at this point I may as well totally go full nerd and help other people become more educated on the different parts. A culvert is a name given to any tunnel carrying a stream or drainage water under a railroad or even modernly a road. But none of the individual parts of a culvert are called a culvert, just a whole kit and caboodle. Let's do a walkthrough. As we approach the culvert, we can see on the sides and at the entrance we have riprap, which is loose but large stones to help the flow of the water not become impeded. To the left and the right, we see this culvert has an apron, which are the low-lying walls of flat stone that will help direct the flow of the water once it leaves. These low-lying walls are attached to the full-height walls called the wing walls, which hold back the embankment from slowing or getting wet and sliding down. The larger stones at the base of the wing wall and entrance into the holes are called your abutments, which are usually extremely large stones laid out in a dead man fashion to act as an anchor to the entrance. The arch, which is typically referred to as a bevel or a crown, is laid out in keystone fashion, and in this instance forms a 15-foot tall, 10-foot wide barrel. The barrel is the hole that carries the water, and for this structure, 199 feet. Because the water is flowing away from us, this side would be the inlet and the other side would be called the outlet. Immediately above the arch are the stones forming the head wall. The stones above the abutments on the wing wall are called your shoulder. The stones that are sitting on top of the head wall and along the top of the wing wall is called the weathering course, sometimes referred to as coping stones or capstones. And oddly enough, these guys were not chipped down on their edges to create what is called a throating, which would allow water to drip down and away instead of down and under, where freeze thaw during the winter months can cause the most damage and dislocate the rocks. The stones placed squarely within the floor of the barrel are called your bottom plate. The stones above that make up the ceiling are called the top plate, which I'm not sure is the correct term when the arch continues all the way through the barrel. So let me know down in the comments if it's still called a top plate when it's both the ceiling and the sidewalls of a barrel because it's curved. As we climb up on top, we have arrived at the parapet. The portion that crosses over the barrel from the top and is designed to carry a road or a railway is the embankment. And when we go to the middle or center line of the embankment, we were on the crown. Together, all these parts make up what we call a culvert. Because you will give perspective to the embankment. Okay, I'm just getting a few more things set up here. Got to get my light because this aqueduct is really dark. Dark enough that the camera won't pick it up. So I want to get the light ready and then we're going to head in. So just see you in a minute. Okay, here we go. We got water. It looks like we should be okay when we hit the floor here. Alrighty, look at that. Let's get some light on this subject. Oh, this is so cool. Let's do a turn around of the camera. I don't know if you can see, I got head clearance in here. I stand 6'2". This is pretty cool. All right, here we go. Back to the tunnel. We're walking through. Gosh, I love this. I want one of these where I live. That would be so awesome. Can you imagine having one of these underneath your house? I know in old European movies they used to do that. This is awesome. Be very careful if you decide to do this. It is Pennsylvania slippery. Oh. Look at that stonework. Yeah, we got a big old spider body. Spider bodies. Alrighty. That was a deep spot. Coming out. I hope you like this exploration to a remnant of your past that still stands today for everyone to view how we once worked with our hands and built things to last. As always, I thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.